then again, I am ripping it different.
So 1 minute now until we get the market on open imbalance. So looking out to the market on open imbalance, S&P 500 a sell side of 365 million, Nasdaq 100 a sell side of 14 million, Dow 30 a sell side of 100 million, Mag 7 a sell side of 6 million. So out the gate here, noting Broadcom shares up 5% after the company forecast Q2 revenue above estimates last night. Also, US listed shares of Alibaba are up 2.1% as domestic shares hit over a 3-year high on the release of their AI reasoning model. White House says the jobs data shows that the manufacturing industry is rebounding. Mexico's President Sheinbaum says the auto sector could produce even more in Mexico in complying with USMCA norms. Mexico's President Sheinbaum says we shouldn't face reciprocal tariffs in April. A Toronto stock index rising spot 65% after clawing back an earlier decline. Out the gate as well, just noting the dollar pairing some of its losses, still down around some spot 4%. Looking at the Dixie, S&P 500 up spot 1%. So in 10 minutes time now, at the top of the hour, due to get some comments from Bank of England's man. So Fox Business Network interview with Trump says the other alternative to Iran is that you have to do something because Iran can't have nuclear weapons. Trump says we'd rather negotiate a deal with Iran. Hassett says we will see a bigger hit on government employment in the next reports. In 5 minutes' time now, at the top of the hour, we're expecting comments from Bank of England's man.
Iran's UN mission says Iran has not yet received Trump's letter.
US economic advisor Hassett on Trump making exemptions to steel tariffs says, I doubt it.
Just a reminder, at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time, we're expected to get comments from Fed's Bowman. So a reminder with Fed's Bowman, speaking on monetary policy transmission post-COVID, at an event hosted by the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Text and Q&A are expected. US stock index is turning positive, S&P 500 up 0.3%, Nasdaq up 0.5%, and Dow up 0.2%. US Energy Department says no requests have been made yet to Congress on money for filling Strategic Petroleum Reserve. US Energy Department says no. It says that filling SPR is not something you do immediately on a request. Replenishing reserve will take years. Also, about 5 minutes ago, until we expect to hear from Fed's Bowman speaking on monetary policy. Text and Q&A is expected. Energy Department saying Secretary Wright was estimating it would take $20 billion to fill the SPR. Ed Bowman says labor market and economic activity will become a larger factor in US central bank policy discussions going forward. Shocks and structural changes since COVID-19 pandemic may have masked transmission of Fed policy to the economy. Immigration and productivity is boosting investment demand, and neutral rate likely has risen since the pandemic. Navarro says Trump admin will bring positive supply shocks. White House trade advisor Navarro says auto companies pledge to move supply chains to the US faster as part of trade negotiations.
Trump is to deliver remarks at 11 a.m. Eastern Time.
White House doesn't provide theme of Trump's 11 a.m. remarks, though. Nasdaq 100 falling 0.5% to session low. S&P 500 down 0.4%. Nasdaq 100 falls 10% from record high, set to enter correction.
Trump trade advisor Navarro on reciprocal tariffs says one number for each country.
That concludes a CNBC interview with Navarro. So just a bit more detail, reciprocal tariffs will focus on one tariff rate for each nation to reflect tariffs and non-tariff measures. Minutes away from 10:45 a.m. Eastern Time, we get Fed's Williams in a panelist. He's a panelist on a discussion about monetary policy transmission post-COVID at an event hosted by University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Text and Q&A are both expected. Also expecting to get commentary from ECB's Centeno and Kazakh, speaking at the Bank of Portugal conference about monetary policy transmission and the labour market. According to the Wall Street Journal here, officials discuss banning DeepSeek chatbot from US app stores. White House weighs measures to curb DeepSeek over data security concerns, according to sources. US likely to ban DeepSeek chatbot from government devices. We have posted the article from the Wall Street Journal. Again, US likely to ban Chinese app DeepSeek from government devices on the Financial Newsfeed for you to read through. In regards to the Nasdaq 100 index, which sank into a correction on Friday as investors continue to sour on the mega cap tech stocks that led the stock market rally over the past 2 years. The index was down 0.8% as of 10:37 a.m. New York time and is now 10.2% below a peak hit just last month, putting it past the 10% threshold that represents a market correction. Among notable decliners, Nvidia slid 0.7%, Amazon fell 1.5%, Microsoft 1.9%, and the Magnificent 7 Total Return Index, which entered a correction of its own in late February, was down 1.1% on Friday. So much of the slump reflects Wall Street's rapid rotation out of companies tied to AI. 5 minutes away until we're expected to hear from Fed's Williams and ECB Centeno and Kazakhs, speaking at different events. There isn't a video that we can find for Fed's Williams. So seeing US 10-year Treasury yields extending decline to around 4.229%. One minute to go now. So we're expecting to get text until we're expected to get text from Feds Williams. Reminder whether Centeno and Kazakh's no indication whether text or Q&A is expected, so we'll see if we do get in. Ten seconds. Williams says no sign of inflation expectations becoming unmoored, and data shows lag before inflation shock hits short-term expectations. Inflation expectations are back to pre-pandemic levels. Feds Williams does not comment on monetary policy or economic outlook. Also says results suggest inflation shocks dissipate after 5 years. a US trade representative to hold hearing March 11th on China semiconductor policies. So just seeing across some of the wires here that Trump is due to speak about the jobs report at 11 a.m. Eastern time. But no, we'll see what he does say. Probably is going to be about it. Putin said to be ready to agree Ukraine truce with conditions. So again, Putin said to be ready to agree Ukraine truce with conditions. Further detail into this, Russia is willing to discuss a temporary truce in Ukraine, provided there is progress toward a final peace settlement, according to people familiar with the matter. Seeing movement towards the downside on WTI, a little bit of movement towards the upside on the S&P 500. Dollar seeing weakness here in the market. Also, Bitcoin seeing a little bit of movement towards the upside. Further into this, in the first signal of a positive response from Putin to Trump's call for a ceasefire, the offer was conveyed at last month's talks in Saudi Arabia between top Russian and American officials, the people said. So in order to agree to a cessation of hostilities, there would have to be a clear understanding about the framework principles of the final peace accord. Russia will insist in particular on establishing the parameters of an eventual peacekeeping mission, including agreement on which nations would take part. ECB Centeno says we're almost out of the woods in this inflationary cycle. Centeno says ECB rate cuts are to continue until inflation converged. So a reminder, in around a couple of minutes, Trump is due to speak. We do have a video, we'll post it out on the feed for you. We have posted out the live feed where Trump is due to speak at the Oval Office on from Fox News.
This reunion wasn't just a footnote in Roland's story. It was and stands as a testament to the bonds forged here in this place. Bonds that many who have trained and served here would immediately recognize and feel. From the pine forest where Roland trained to the battlefields of today, Fort Bragg has carried that spirit forward, shaping warriors who have answered the call across the years. Over 80 years have passed since Roland Bragg arrived here. 8 decades of soldiers from Fort Bragg deploying to every major conflict, defending America and her allies across the globe. And they come home to Fort Bragg. For some, it may be more. It may be home for just a few months, and for others, a lifetime. But this place is more than a military stronghold. It's the lifeblood of our region. If it were a city, this 260,000 strong person community would make it the 5th largest in North Carolina. Its economic impact, over $8 billion annually, fuels jobs, businesses, and growth in Fayetteville and across Cumberland County. Our soldiers, our spouses, and veterans are seamlessly intertwined in this community. Teachers in our schools, nurses in our hospitals, students at Fayetteville State and other institutions of higher education. These community ties and partnerships have bound us together across generations and form a collective pride and reverence for this place we honor today. Today we salute a man who answered the call, came to North Carolina, and forged the best version of himself. And so today we honor a hero worthy of the name Bragg. It is synonymous with excellence. It is the home of airborne and special operations forces. When the nation needs to project power on short notice, the first call comes to Fort Bragg. When that call comes, we answer with speed and overwhelming force, and if necessary, we will fight and prevail. Just down the street, about 500
Republican
meters
Hill
off
says
to my
Trump
right,
should work with
stands
Congress
a
on a
statue.
Bitcoin reserve.
We call him Bragg, didn't arrive here a hero. Shaped in the crucible of Bragg's training grounds and in the battlefields, he became one. So Iron Mike stands as proof of that promise. The nameless airborne trooper, a quiet hero reflecting not just who we are, but who we can become. And it has been my experience that this place and our nation and our Army are chock full of people like Roland Bragg. Fort Bragg is where soldiers transform, where the ordinary find the extraordinary, and where the call finds its answer, where a quiet man from Maine emerges a hero. In his honor and in the shared legacy of all who have called this place home, we answer the call. Welcome back to Bragg. May this place continue to forge heroes for our nation. Airborne, all the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, the granddaughter of Private First Class Roland L. Bragg, Mrs. Rebecca Amakor.
Well, good morning, everybody. Reflecting on memories of my grandparents and the question on many folks' minds after the renaming announcement, who is Roland L. Bragg? Well, let me tell you, he was a loving and devoted husband, father, and grandfather. He was a provider. He was a pillar of our small community in Nobleboro, Maine, and a philanthropist that did not seek recognition for his generosity. Even his own family did not know the full extent of his generosity until after he was gone. He liked to joke around. He didn't take things too seriously, and he was extraordinarily curious about everything. He loved new technology and wanted to know how things worked. And I remember him being particularly tickled when VHS movie cameras came out. I can only imagine what he would think of the technology we have now.
Williams says, I still think neutral rate is lower than the 1990s.
I never saw my granddad wear his military uniform. He was not one to go to a Memorial Day parade or a Veterans Day parade.
Williams. US stocks extend fall, Nasdaq down 1%.
Negotiation and people skills from observing my grandfather.
Sono 22 anni che mi chiedete un libro sull'immobiliare.
My favorite jobs that we looked at together was out in Vinyl Haven, which is a small island off mid-coast Maine. And it was so much fun because we got to take the ferry boat out to the island. My granddad also provided encouragement for us to do well in school and rewarded each A with $1, which may not sound like much today, but in the 1980s, I assure you it was much appreciated. He was a very hard worker, almost to a fault. He was a man of many talents, a jack of all trades, and if something needed to be done, he would figure out how to do it. I remember him building cottages, salvaging buildings or items within them, moving buildings, operating and working on heavy equipment, welding, working on vehicles, working on and building a retaining wall for the home which we affectionately called the brick house that he and my grandmother had intended on moving into when they downsized, although they never did move into that home. He never talked about his time in World War II with me. I love history and was curious about it, and I discussed it with my grandmother a number of times. And I feel very blessed. You heard a moment ago the story of the man, John Martz, who reached out to him from California. This happened in the mid-90s. Again, my grandfather had spent his entire life thinking everyone in the back of that ambulance had died. And I feel like it was a tremendous gift for him to learn that someone had survived, and it was a true blessing. I also really love the story that my grandmother told me, which is also recounted in what is our history book for Noblesboro, Maine. I'll show you guys a copy here. This was a book that was written in 1988, and this was done in celebration for our bicentennial. And my grandparents both are featured in this book for a number of different reasons because they were very involved in their community. But there is one story that's recounted in here. It's one that my grandmother had shared with me. My grandmother told me that she and my grandfather were dating before he left for the war. And she decided to send him a Parker pen and pencil set with metal caps for Christmas. When he got that set, he wore it over the pocket over his heart. And thankfully, when he was hit in the chest with shrapnel, the metal pen and pencil prevented the shrapnel from entering his heart. He was sent to an Army hospital to convalesce, and during that time, he wrote home to his brother Floyd and Floyd's wife Lizzie in a letter dated February 22nd, 1945. And I'm going to just read you a short passage from that letter. When I got back to the rest camp, I came to the hospital to let them take some steel out of me. All I've been doing here is writing letters. This war is no fun, though. There's too much grief in it. I lost a lot of my buddies, but they all went down fighting. I learned one thing, and that is rank doesn't mean a thing when you're in a tight spot. It's the one with a little common sense. All I can say is that I thank God that I'm still here today. I've always loved this quote, and I've shared it with my own children over the years when retelling our family history. And I think my granddad, if he were here today, would encourage the folks here to use their common sense, to work hard in school and beyond. And most certainly, he would want them to appreciate the importance of giving back and making an impact on your own communities when you're done with your service to your country. And I thank you for having us here today.
At this time, we invite the family of Private First Class Roland L. Bragg to join the Honorable Daniel Driscoll, the 18th Airborne Commander, and the Command Sergeant Major, and the Fort Bragg Garrison Commander and Command Sergeant Major for the sign unveiling. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the playing and singing of the Army Song. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony. We thank you for attending. Airborne all the way.
And a moving ceremony from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, renamed for Roland Bragg, an officer from the United States Army in World War II, an inspiring story that I really was not familiar with as well. So reading about this great American hero and a humble man, and look forward to honoring him with the renaming of Fort Bragg in North Carolina. We now await Oval Office remarks from President Trump before he is scheduled to depart for the Southern White House in Mar-a-Lago. Of course, Florida, the Sunshine State, his new residence, and has been enjoying that for a number of years now. Of course, it was initially supposed to be a presidential retreat, but then became one once again with President Trump ascending to the presidency 8 years ago now. Can you believe that? Only the second gentleman to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Thank you to our sponsors here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. FreeTrumpBook.com. What a great way to get started on your Christmas shopping. I'll give you a little hint here. It's free, and you get a couple of wonderful guides. The Kids Guide to President Trump and the Kids Guide to the Courage of President Trump, along with a free Christmas ornament. So a great way to share with your young patriots at home, or maybe that neighbor who's not paying attention to everything that's happening right now. How can you not be with the way the news cycle is? But freetrumpbook.com, all you have to do is pay for shipping and handling. Brought to you by the great Mike Huckabee, the ambassador to Israel. An amazing man and former governor of Arkansas. Of course, his successor and lovely daughter, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, doing an outstanding job as America's youngest governor, and also former White House press secretary under President Trump. FreeTrumpBook.com. Learn everything about how President Trump ran and why he did the first time, what the issues are, and how he's impacting generations to come. So again, FreeTrumpBook.com. Jump ahead on your Christmas shopping list. And how about AngelPaste.com, a wonderful Christian company out of Spring, Texas, just off of the Gulf of America. And this Miracle Cream, such a wonderful thing to experience. I tried it on the show here just last year and have some at home as well. It will take away your dry skin. I promise you this. All non-GMO, no chemicals. And they have other products that help with an immune boost if you take the orange option, or they also have one that repels mosquitoes. And they're used to that, not being far from Houston, Texas, a very tropical climate. So you get those nasty buggers down there. And AngelPaste.com is taking care of you in so many ways. Again, non-GMO, no chemicals, vitamin Bs, vitamin Cs, everything good for your skin to absorb. Christian owned, and they hire veterans as well. Very pro-America. So we love AngelPaste.com. Please see all of their products again at AngelPaste.com. Thank you for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. And if you're just joining in to the network, I'm Robert McNeely, TGIF. Thank you for joining in on Friday morning, about 11:40 on the East Coast, 8:40 in the Golden State of California, and that's a golden image of our White House in this new golden era as President Trump has laid out on Truth Social just the excitement behind nearly 40 days in office, or 50 days in office. Can you believe how quick time is going by? As he mentioned in the speech the other night, it's almost as if he's accomplished more than those who have been 100 days in office or even 4 years. We're actually going to a press conference with the Vice President of the United States right now, J.D. Vance, giving a press conference.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and I appreciate you being here. It's great to be here. It's great to talk to some of the incredible people that we have both at the local level, the Texas state level, and also, of course, our federal border patrol, who are doing so many good things to keep us safe. And I have some bad news and some good news. And the bad news is that because of what Joe Biden did at the southern border for 4 years, we had record increases in migrant crime, in fentanyl deaths, and in just floods and floods of people who shouldn't be in our country who came into the United States of America. We also have a number of ways in which the cartels became more advanced, better war fighters, because Joe Biden opened up the American southern border and allowed the cartels to turn it into their playground. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is, as President Trump said last night at the State of the Union, it turns out we didn't need new laws. We didn't need fancy legislation. We just needed a new president of the United States, and thank God that's exactly what we have. And I will say that the most heartening message that I take away from my visit here at the Texas border is the number of Border Patrol agents who have come up to me and said thank you, or said because of this, we've cut the number of border crossings from 1,500 a day to 30 a day. Or the people who have come up and said we've seen a reduction in 85% of the number of people who are dying at the American southern border. And every single day that we continue to keep this border safe, that means less migrant crime, that means less fentanyl coming into our communities, that means more safety and security for the people of the United States of America. And of course, we know the border problem, the border crisis under Biden's administration was a national crisis, but it acutely affected the communities right here. And I've already heard heartbreaking stories of people who are still picking up the pieces, local mayors who are still dealing with the budgetary consequences of what the Joe Biden administration allowed to happen at the American southern border. And that, too, is something that President Trump is going to help address, help fix, and help solve. Now, I wanted to bring Secretary Hegseth and Director Gabbard at DNI down here because, one, I obviously enjoy their company, and it's good to have them down here with me looking around today. But unfortunately, we know that because of what's happened, the border crisis has become a matter of national intelligence, and it's also become something that requires the Department of Defense to engage with. I was talking with Paul Perez earlier. The drone technology that the cartels are using requires, unfortunately, a military response and military support. So it was important for Secretary Hegseth to see what's going on, because we know that the millions and millions of people who were let in over the last 4 years, many of them are connected to foreign terrorists. It's important for our leader of national intelligence to get a sense of what's here on the ground. So before we take questions from the press, and all of us are willing to take questions, I want to give Secretary Hegseth and then Director Gabbard an opportunity to say a few words themselves. Mr. Secretary.
Well, Mr. Vice President, thank you very much for inviting us. It's great to be here with you, with the director, with our fellow friends in civilian clothes and in other shades of green. This is a demonstration of a true partnership on the southern border. As President Trump has made clear on the campaign trail and from day one and last night, border security is national security. And from the Defense Department, we've watched for a couple of decades other people's borders being secured while ours was open for an invasion of drugs and of violence and of chaos for American communities. That stops under President Trump. And the Defense Department has assets that we can bring to bear, not just troops, not just surveillance, not just equipment, but actual planning and capabilities that enhance what Border Patrol is already doing, which is why it's been incredible to hear from our partners about what we've been able to allow them to do, facilitate them, and we've seen it in the numbers. 98% drop in crossings on the southern border. We're not yet at 100% operational control, but we are on our way because that is the mandate that the president has given us. So more resources are coming to this border. We are dedicated to securing it. That's the reason for our trip and our partnership. And I want to thank all the men and women who've been doing it recently in uniform, who have been doing it a long time right here, have dedicated their lives to securing the American people. And at the Defense Department, we are committed to continuing to being a big part of it. So, Mr. Vice President, thanks for having us.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.
Trump administration ways
Great.
pulling hundreds
Now,
of millions
Director
in
of National
federal funds
Intelligence,
from
Tulsi Gabbard.
Colombia,
Tulsi.
according to the Wall Street Journal.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your leadership in bringing the country's attention to what has been happening here at the border and the significant change that has already occurred under the short time that President Trump has been in office. Really, what you're seeing here today and what you'll continue to see is a unified effort across President Trump's national security team, the Department of Homeland Security, towards our mission, which is to ensure a safe, free, and prosperous society for Americans. As Director of National Intelligence, there are a number of areas where we are focused. The President talked about in his speech, over 21 million people have come across our borders illegally under Joe Biden's administration. There are many of them that we don't know who they are. They have not been vetted. We don't know where they are. I'll give you one quick example of one of the problems that we are getting after. From Central Asia, there were over 4,000 people who came across our borders using an ISIS-affiliated network. Our National Counterterrorism Center went through and identified those individuals. There were hundreds of them who were either known terrorists or associated with known terrorists. That information was provided to the Biden administration. You may remember in some of the news, a little over 100 of those people were arrested in 2024. Of those who were arrested, only 8 were either deported or remained in custody. Only 8. The rest of them were released back into our country. Where are they? What are they doing? What may they be plotting? This is just the beginning. There are many, many areas that we need to stay very focused on, working with Department of Homeland Security, working with the FBI to ensure that we're keeping the American people safe. Our Counterterrorism Center is working on making sure that we have that single source for vetting so that we can figure out who is actually in our country and identify those who pose a threat and get them removed. The President's designation of the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations falls directly into this, especially as we're seeing some of the tactics that these cartels are using reflect some of the tactics that we've seen used by Islamist terrorists in countries that many of us have served in overseas. Our mission is very clear. Our objective is to keep the American people safe. I'm grateful to be a part of this team that President Trump has assembled to accomplish that mission. Thank you.
So before I take questions, let me just say 2 final things. First of all, the reason why we've seen, as Pete said, a 98% reduction of border crossings, the reason why this particular site has gone from over 1,500 crossings per day to 30 crossings per day is because President Trump has empowered and, in fact, demanded that his whole government take the task of border control seriously. And that's exactly what we're doing. And of course, and this leads to my final point before we take questions, it is impossible to do without the men and women on the ground who are actually doing the hard work. They just want to be empowered to do their jobs. President Trump has made that possible. So from the bottom of my heart and for a grateful nation, to every person I've met here today, thank you for working hard on the American people's business. It's been an honor to be with you. It's been an honor to see what you do, and we're going to keep on supporting you over the next 4 years. Congressman Gonzalez, thank you for being here, and thank you for your leadership. And now we'll take some questions from reporters. Sir.
So, as you guys have been exemplifying for today that border crossings are down, a lot of attention has been turned to the interior since obviously there's been a lot of illegal immigrants. What is, in your opinion, the biggest obstacle to actually carrying out President Trump's mass deportations? Even though, yes, like apprehensions and arrests and deportations have gone up in his first month, but a lot of people are expecting a bigger capacity for deportation. So what's the biggest hurdle?
So let me say a few things about that. So first of all, Rome wasn't built in a day. And we have seen pretty significant increases in deportations and apprehensions and arrests. But we have to remember that President Biden gutted the entire immigration enforcement regime of this country. We are trying to rebuild so that we actually empower people to enforce the immigration laws of the American people. It is common sense. It's what the American people want us to do. There are a couple of other things that we're working on. And I don't want to get ahead of any public announcements, but one of the ways that we wanted to make sure that we're enforcing our border is that we make it easier for people who are here illegally to go back home of their own accord. We don't want to have to go around and arrest every person, but we will enforce the American people's immigration laws. If you're here illegally, the message from our administration is you should go back home, and if you want to come to the United States, apply through the proper channels. That's an important thing that we're doing. And the final thing is this costs money. One of the most important parts of the president's reconciliation priorities is, of course, tax reform on the one hand, and on the other hand, making sure that we get proper resources so that we can pay for the flights, and we can pay for the detention centers, and we can pay for all the components necessary to ensure that we're re-migrating illegal immigrants back to their country of origin. I guarantee it is a part of the president's priorities. We'll keep on working on it. We've made a lot of progress, but we're going to keep on working on it over the remainder of the president's term. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Vice President, I want to ask you about border wall and tariffs. But first on the border wall, how do you and the president...
Could you say your outlet, by the way, when you guys ask questions?
Yeah, Reagan Reese, Daily Caller.
Thank you.
How do you and the president define success this term with the border wall, and how much of the southern border wall needs to be walled off before Trump leaves office?
Well, look, I think the president's hope is that by the end of the term, we build the entire border wall. And of course, that's the physical structure of the border wall itself. But we even heard today, there are so many good technological tools, so many great artificial intelligence enabled technologies that allow us, for example, you know, a camera, not a person, but a camera picks up somebody 2 miles away who's about to come across the southern border. Maybe it's livestock, right? Maybe it's a critter in the desert. Maybe it's a human being with a weapon on their back. We're using artificial intelligence to make us better at the job of border enforcement, but we've got to make sure that technology is deployed across the entire American southern border. We're going to do it as much as we can, as broadly as we can, because that's how we're going to protect the American people's security. Yeah, go ahead.
Last time they were paused because they deployed 10,000 troops to the border. What can they do this time to make the tariffs go away?
Well, what the president has said is we need a sustained commitment from the government of Mexico to take the job of border security seriously. Fentanyl is the single largest cause of death among young Americans, and we know that a substantial portion of it is, the precursors are made in China. They come to Mexico, they're manufactured in Mexico and brought across the border by the Mexican drug cartels. We want to see fewer Americans dying of these terrible fentanyl overdoses when we're going to apply as much leverage as possible to the Mexican government as possible. In some ways, look, the president obviously cares deeply about the American people. He serves the American people first. I actually think he's doing a huge favor to the people of Mexico, because if they don't get control of these cartels, the people of Mexico are going to wake up in a narco state where the cartels have more power than their own government. President Trump is trying to help. The Mexican government needs to take this issue of immigration enforcement seriously. In the back, yeah.
Mr. Vice President, Ali Bradley, News Nation. So since the designation of the cartels as terrorists, does that give the United States the green light to go into Mexico and to strike them there? I mean, right now, obviously, they've struck in the Houthis in Yemen. So why not, when we've seen cross-border violence, go after them in Mexico? And then my second question is about a designation I'll follow up on, please.
Go ahead and ask the second question.
Why isn't the Juarez/La Línea cartel designated when it's in one of the most deadliest places on the planet? Juarez has been designated as one of the deadliest cities. It's right across from El Paso. We've talked to community leaders. They say, we know Juarez cartel's operating in the U.S., and so are their affiliates. We don't even want to talk about it out loud, though, because then we'll put a target on our back. They're scared. Border Patrol even thought they were designated, but they're not. The State Department didn't tell me why.
So on that, we're looking at additional organizations. Obviously, this is the determination of whether to determine a particular organization, a terrorist organization, is something that we consult with our leaders of the Department of Defense. We also consult with our friends in other governments. We maintain the optionality to designate further organizations, terrorist organizations, if we feel that we need to, in order to protect the American people. And I think President Trump has made it very clear he's not going to be shy about designating some of these cartel organizations as terrorists if he thinks he has to protect the American people. Your first question was about
American forces to strike.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So look, I'm not going to make any announcements about any invasions of Mexico here today. The president has a megaphone,
Trump
and of course
to sign
he'll speak to these issues.
Related to student loans.
Illegal immigration. or foreign terrorist organizations or otherwise law-breaking activities. So this executive order will direct your Department of Education and Department of the Treasury to basically bring about modifications to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program in order to ensure that people who are engaged in these sorts of activities can't benefit from a program that's really not intended to support those sorts of things.
And what are the consequences if they are not good?
The consequences would be that they wouldn't get forgiveness of their student loans as they would be eligible for if they were working for the government or a normal nonprofit that's not violating the law.
All right. Any questions on that? Anybody have any questions? So we'll talk about the manufacturing turnaround, and it's been very early, but it's pretty significant. The numbers were much better, as you know, than projected by the media.
Trump touts manufacturing turnaround.
A little surprising, actually, how strong, how fast, because we have many companies are moving into our country. As you probably know, it's a statistic that everyone talks about, but nobody seems to have done much about. Since the beginning of NAFTA, there's been 90,000 plants and factories closed in this country. Think of that. 90,000 plants and factories have been closed in this country. Many of them have been car manufacturing.
So we're just going to post the
and
video from the White House, which has the actual live video.
You're going to see it already. We already have
Fox News one is probably going to show the speech after he's done. They did say live,
and they stopped, and they're coming
there we go.
now because of the
Video is
tariffs.
out on the Financial News
And that's a
feed
big
for you to
deal.
watch
That's what
from the
you
White
wanna
House
hear.
live.
During the last year, the Biden administration saw a loss of more than 110,000 manufacturing jobs, or 9,000 manufacturing jobs every single month. It averaged about 9,000 a month, 110,000 manufacturing jobs. During the first full month in office, we've not only stopped that manufacturing collapse, but we've
Trump to sign
begun
action
to
on public
rapidly
service loan
reverse it
forgiveness program.
and get major gains. We created 10,000 manufacturing jobs in February alone. That hasn't happened in a long time. And these aren't government jobs, which actually we cut. These are private sector manufacturing jobs. So we gained all of those jobs, 10,000 jobs, and we barely started yet. That's a very unusual number. People are surprised by it. I'm even a little surprised. On auto jobs, we created almost 9,000 new jobs in the auto production field. And the reason for that is largely they think things are happening, so they're already geared up. In some cases, they had rooms in their plants, or they had empty plants that they were able to put into use quickly because they see because of the tariffs, they don't want to be dealing with other places, and they don't want to go back and forth and around and through the borders and across Mexico border and Canada border and all of, they want to have the jobs in one location. And they've had space, and if they had space, they were able to create the jobs almost immediately. In some cases, they'll be building plants to take care of those jobs. So we created 9,000 new jobs already in the auto production, auto parts manufacturing. So
Gillian
we want
says
the auto
labour
parts
market supported by
ideally, and I think
consumption
from
and social
a
benefits.
simplicity standpoint too, to be built and made in the United States. It's in a single
Excuse me,
month.
that was to
all
do
took place
with
in a
Brazil
single month.
there.
9,000 new auto jobs. You haven't heard that in a long time. After auto workers lost more than 27,000 auto jobs in the final year of Biden. These are also high-paying jobs. These are very prime jobs. The ISM Manufacturing Survey and the S&P Manufacturing Survey have also confirmed that our administration is presiding over a brand new
So Trump comments on manufacturing and
boom
auto jobs.
after major collapse under Biden. It was a collapse. All he did is keep adding new government jobs, which are not the jobs you want. We're trying to shrink government and grow the private sector. That's what we've been doing. Under the final 2 years of Biden, 1 in every 4 jobs created in America was a government
Trump says
job.
we'll
That's a
shrink
tremendous
government
percentage.
and grow the private
But
sector.
under the first full month of President Trump, which we haven't even gotten started yet, an incredible 93% of all job gains were in the private sector. So that statistic just came out. Big gains for native-born Americans. For the first time in 15 months, the job gains for native-born Americans, for American people, people born in America, exceeded job gains for migrant and foreign-born workers. This is the first time that's happened in more than 15 months. Employment for native-born workers went up by 284,000, while foreign-born workers went down by 87,000. Now, you've heard the same stat where foreign workers were taking up all the jobs or almost all the jobs. In some cases, literally all of the jobs. And now it's
Trump says that I want
284,000
auto parts to be built
jobs
and
here,
made in the
people
US.
born in our country, 284,000, while foreign-born workers went down by 87,000. First time that's happened in a long time. So these are incredible numbers, and they're very early. I mean, we're here for 5 weeks, but we have been talking about it since the big win in November 5th. So a lot of these people, they listen to us speak and they say, well, I'm going to gear up, and they're gearing up, and so they've been gearing up. They've had a little time. It's not just 5 weeks. It's 5 weeks plus a few months, and they put it into effect pretty quickly. They have confidence that what I'm saying is going to happen. So with that, I'd like to ask a highly respected gentleman, Kevin Hassett. He's been with us for a long time, and he's been right about a lot. We had the greatest economy in history in the first term, and Kevin was a big part of it. So Kevin, could you maybe give it a little description, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Trump. I think that the three things that you emphasized during the campaign is that you wanted to create domestic, high-paying manufacturing jobs, that you wanted to end wasteful government spending and reduce the unproductive government workers, and in fact unleash them into the private economy where they could be more productive, and to create jobs for Americans. A lot of people said that if you deported illegals, that employment would go down because no Americans would take those jobs. And if you look, 280,000 American-born folks were hired, manufacturing jobs are going up, and this is just out of the expectation of your future policies, really, sir. It's in April when your Reciprocal Trade Act is expected to happen. The tax cuts haven't passed yet, and so people are clearly expecting the golden age. And if you want to forecast the future numbers, everybody, just keep in mind that President Trump has already gotten us $1.7 trillion in commitments of new factories, and those haven't even happened yet. Those aren't even in the numbers. And so I expect this is going to be a glimpse of a golden age to come, sir.
Thank you very much. One other thing, in Canada, we find that they're charging us over 200% for dairy products. You know about that. And when I left, we had that well taken care of, but under Biden, they just kept raising it. Very difficult to deal with, the Canadian representatives. 250% for dairy products, tariff. So where do you hear that? You don't hear that. They have a tremendously high tariff. Give you the exact numbers in a little while coming out, on lumber. So they sell us lumber. They have a tremendous tariff. They make it impossible for us to
Trump
sell
says Canada has tremendously high
dairy
tariffs on
products
lumber
into Canada, but our numbers are a tiny fraction of that, almost non-existent. And what we're doing is freeing up our forests from the environmental nonsense that they put on them, where you can't cut down a tree. And we have to cut down trees in order to build the firewalls. And those trees are sold, but we're freeing it up on an emergency basis because Canada has been ripping us off for years on tariffs for lumber and for dairy products. 250%, nobody ever talks about that. 250% tariff, which is taking advantage of our farmers, so that's not gonna happen anymore. They'll be met with the exact same tariff unless they drop it, and that's what reciprocal means. And we
Trump
may do
on
it as
Canada
early
says
as
we
today,
do.
or we'll
We may
wait
do
till
more
Monday or
tariffs
Tuesday.
today. It again says
But that's
we
what we're
may
gonna
do
We're
more
gonna
tariffs
charge the
today.
same thing. It's not fair. Never has been fair, and they've treated our farmers badly. Look, our country's been ripped off by everybody, and that stops now. I had it stopped in my first term, and we're going to really stop it now because.
So Trump saying we may do reciprocal tariffs as early as today, and may charge them what they charge us.
And a trade standpoint has been absolutely ripped off by almost every
Did see a little bit
country
of weakening from the Canadian
in the
dollar
world.
back
Canada,
Not really a whole lot
Mexico,
there.
and then you just go right down the line. India charges us massive tariffs, massive. You can't even sell anything into India. it's almost restrictive. It is restrictive. You know, we do very little business inside. They've agreed, by the way, they want to cut their tariffs way down now because somebody's finally exposing them for what they've done. And same thing with China, same thing with a lot of other countries. And the EU has been a terrible abuser of this country. I mean, the EU
Trump's saying count on Canada tariffs may do today or Monday or Tuesday.
They have taken it, but they're not taking
the EU has
advantage
been
when I'm
terrible
enjoying. So,
abuser on tariffs.
sometimes you'll hear some negative things. It's always from outside countries. America will
Voice
be very
news
strong.
disconnected.
And, you know, if I'm a foreign country, they're going to do fine. But they can't do like they used to do because we're going to bring back our business into this country. We need it from a job standpoint. We need it from even just a psychological standpoint. Think of it, 90,000 factories are gone since the beginning of NAFTA. So we're not going to have that, and we're going to see them build it back. Now we've already had 5 major automobile companies. First time you've heard this in a long time, since my first term actually, where we were really rocking and rolling, and then Biden came in and he stopped everything, like such a stupid thing to do, not even a believable thing. But we have many auto plants now coming in. We have big chip plants. We have the biggest chip company in the world, most powerful, probably one of the most powerful companies in the world. Wouldn't you say, Kevin? And he's coming in and they're building one of the largest chip plants in the world. That'll be done in Arizona, mostly in Arizona. And that'll give us a big percentage. At one plant will give us a big percentage of the chip market, something we have very little of. You know, we used to have Intel, and Intel was run by a man named Andy Grove. And Andy Grove was a tough, smart guy. I used to read about him when I was a young man, and he did an incredible job. He really dominated the chip business. And then he died, and I guess they had a series of people that didn't know what the hell they were doing, and we gradually lost the chip business, and now it's almost exclusively in Taiwan. They stole it from us. They took it from us, and I don't blame them. I give them credit. I blame the people that were sitting in this seat because they allowed it to happen. We could have protected that so easily. But so we had the chip business, and now it's all in Taiwan, almost exclusive, a little bit in South Korea, but mostly in Taiwan. And it's very important. Everything you do, everything you touch is now about chips. The brake of a car, cars have chips all over the place. I was reading an article the other day where they talk about the brakes of a car are loaded up with chips. Who would think that a brake has a chip in it? But it's all about chips. So that was a big thing. And they'll be investing hundreds of billions of dollars in this country, and we'll be taking back a big, big portion of that industry. We have others coming in too. But a lot of car manufacturers are coming in, and they're coming in fast. And one of the reasons you see these numbers, and again, Kevin said it, and I said it a little bit, but the fact that they know I won the election, so after I was president-elect, they assumed that I was going to do what I said, because I do what I say. And so these numbers really reflect a lot of things that took place since November 5th, right? So, Kevin, thank you very much. Great job. Any questions?
Mr. President, how concerned are you that the large-scale federal government layoffs will weaken the labor market? How concerned are you?
The large-scale fentanyl what?
The federal government layoffs will impact the labor market, will weaken the labor market.
Oh. No, I think the labor market's going to be fantastic, but it's going to have high-paying manufacturing jobs as opposed to government jobs. We had too many people in government. You can't just do that. We had many, too many. This is for 40 years. You know, this isn't just now. This built up and got worse and worse, and they just hire more and more people. You look at Department of Education, it seems like so many buildings I ride by, it says Department of Education. They're all over the place. And we don't even want it. We want the education to be given by the states. It'll be much better. It'll move us to the top of the list from the bottom of the list, and actually save us money. But not, it's too important to even talk about them. It'll save us a lot of money, but we don't want that. We want education to be given. So you go to Iowa and Indiana and Idaho and all these places that are so well run. They're going to be producing education that will be the equivalent of, like Denmark is one, and Norway, Sweden. Actually, China is one of the better in terms of education, and so we can't blame size anymore. You know, China has 1.4 billion people, but they're very high on the list. The one thing we're doing well on, we're number one on the list, is cost per pupil. We spend more money than any other country in the world by far. So I jokingly say the one thing we do well on is the cost. We spend more money, and yet we're toward the bottom of the list. Yeah.
Mr. President, I want to ask you, the joint address, millions of Americans watched your joint address earlier this week where you warned that there could be a little disturbance that Americans could feel as a function of these taxes, these tariffs. How much disturbance are you willing to accept in the near term as a function of that? And to set expectations, how long should Americans expect things to cost a bit more?
Well, so far, Peter, there hasn't been very much because these numbers are coming out. We're here for just a little over 4 weeks. And these are fantastic numbers. I was watching some of the reports this morning. They were surprised. There could be some disturbance, a little bit of disturbance. I solved a little bit of that because I have respect for our auto companies, and I gave them a little bit of a 1-month reprieve because it was unfair, although I'm sure they'll take advantage of it. I see they're driving a lot of cars into the U.S. to try and avoid the tariffs, and they're taking advantage of it a little bit. But they called me, they asked me, they said, could they have a little bit of help? And I decided, they're American companies, USMCA, and I let them have that. But this really kicks in, the reciprocals, kicks in on, let's see, I guess the 2nd. And I wanted it to be the 1st so badly, it just didn't want to be on April Fool's Day. So I made it the 2nd. That's going to cost a lot of money. That one day is going to cost a lot of money, but that's okay. But I don't see it. I don't see anything. I see good reports. I think we're going to have good numbers from the beginning. Now, globalists won't love this because this brings jobs back to America. So if they're coming back to America, maybe you'll lose some in other parts of the world. But the other parts of the world have done very well, and they'll continue to do very well. But I think the United States is going to be doing record business. We'll bring a lot of those 90,000 factories that have been lost over the last number of years. It's been, it's hard to believe. 90,000, think of what 90,000 is. 90,000 plants and factories are gone. We're going to bring back many of those plants and factories.
One day the tariffs are on, the next day they're off. Right now the markets, as you know well, prefer stability. Are you done going forward with the pauses and the carve-outs? Is that it for those?
There'll always be changes and adjustments, and you can't just, I could have, for instance, told the American car companies, no, I'm not going to give you anything, and then you wouldn't have had to say, well, they're getting a little extra. It's just a little bit of a 1-month reprieve. They're very happy about what's happening. They won't have to go across borders, and you see the zigzagging. You have a fender made in Canada, you have something else made in Mexico. We don't want that. We want it made here. But there'll always be some modifications. I mean, if you have a wall in front of you, sometimes you have to go around the wall instead of through it. But I think very little. I think very little. On occasion, if we can do something, we want to help companies. We want to help companies create jobs. So I could have left that, and you wouldn't have had a minor change. Instead, I was asked by the real majors, the big majors, if they could do this, and I said, yeah, I'll do it. I want you to produce a lot of jobs. And numerous of the people, actually all of the people I spoke to have already been, they're very much on the way to already doing it. That's why you have auto jobs increase. And the man, I don't know him, Sean Fain, I don't know him, and I did great, as you know, with the auto workers, with the Teamsters, with unions, I did fantastically well. Best numbers ever by a Republican. And I have a lot of respect for those people. But Sean Fain, who I don't know, but wasn't a supporter, although the auto workers were big supporters. I watched him last night, and he said, Donald Trump is absolutely right on tariffs. He said, what he's doing on tariffs is an incredible thing. And it's about time somebody had the guts to do it, because we're going to save auto manufacturing. And I said to people when I was campaigning, you're going to have so many auto jobs, you're not going to believe what's going to happen. We're going to load up Michigan. I won the state of Michigan, as you know. And part of the reason I won it was I got a lot of auto workers that voted for me, Detroit, etc. But I think people are going to be very surprised. Yes?
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned in your remarks chips manufacturing, how a significant percentage is now in Taiwan. You also mentioned it in your address to Congress, and you called on Congress to overturn the CHIPS Act, which had bipartisan support in the last Congress. Why would you like to see this particular law overturned, Mr. President?
Because it's hundreds of billions of dollars, and it's just a waste of money. Now, some people have already taken the money and used it. Actually, it's very hard to qualify because they go by race, they go by gender, they go by all sorts of things. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. You won't be able to find those people. So I don't even think anybody can qualify. They have so many different categories in order to qualify. You have to have so many of a certain race, a certain gender, a certain this, a certain, and I don't think they can qualify, but if they take the money, they better qualify because they'll be watching them. But it's a tremendous waste of money. I didn't give the greatest chip company in the world, one of the greatest companies, I didn't give them 10 cents. They came here because of tariffs, because they didn't want to pay the tariffs. And they also came here because they like the results of the election, because they know that I'm very pro-business and pro-jobs. I mean, I'm pro-business, not for business sake. I'm pro-business because of jobs, because business is producing the jobs. Okay?
Russia, if I may, President Putin is bombing Ukraine.
Yeah.
Do you still believe him when he tells you that he wants peace?
Yeah, no, I believe him. I believe him. I think we're doing very well with Russia. But right now they're bombing the hell out of Ukraine, and I'm finding it more difficult, frankly, to deal with Ukraine. And they don't have the cards. They don't have the cards. As you know, we're meeting in Saudi Arabia on sometime next week, early. And we're talking, I find that in terms of getting a final settlement, it may be easier dealing with Russia, which is surprising because they have all the cards. I mean, they're bombing the hell out of them right now. And I put a statement in, a very strong statement. Can't do that. Can't do that.
Mr. President.
We're trying to help them. And Ukraine has to get on the ball and get a job done. Michael, could you come up here? I see Michael back there. Good, I'm glad. He's traveling all over the world. I just saw him come in the door. Could you give a little definition of what's going on, please?
Sure. Well, the president has been crystal clear, and he's been clear to all sides. The fighting has to stop. Both sides need to get to the table. We had a good engagement. Both leaders have said only President Trump could do so, and only he has been able to do so. We had an initial engagement with the Russians. The Ukrainians had a great opportunity to bind our economies together through that mineral deal. Unfortunately, that didn't go so well, but we think we're going to get things back on track. Secretary Rubio, myself and Ukrainian delegation will be meeting in Saudi Arabia next week to get these talks back on track, get a ceasefire in place, and drive peace home under President Trump's leadership.
I think both parties want to settle. I think if I wasn't president, this war would have had no chance of settlement, zero chance. But I think we're going to get it settled and stopped. We got to stop. They're losing on average 2,000 soldiers a week. That's a lot of soldiers. Do you agree, Peter?
It's a lot of soldiers on both sides, I agree. Do you, Mr. President, think that Vladimir Putin is taking advantage of the U.S. pause right now on intelligence and military aid to Ukraine?
No, I actually think he's doing what anybody else would do. I think he wants to get it stopped and settled, and I think he's hitting them harder than he's been hitting them. And I think probably anybody in that position would be doing that right now. He wants to get it ended, and I think Ukraine wants to get it ended, but I don't see, it's crazy. They're taking tremendous punishment. I don't quite get it, but I suspect, Michael, he probably wants to get it ended.
He does, Mr. President. The Russians are taking incredible losses on the front. As the president has said, this is a meat grinder of people, of material, of national treasure, and no one else has any solutions except to let this war continue forever. But I'll add, the president has had multiple conversations and a visit from President Macron of France, Prime Minister Starmer of the United Kingdom. We have the NATO Secretary General coming next week. We have this meeting with the Ukrainians. We've had it with the Russians. All of this in the president's first month in his leadership. We will engage in the shuttle diplomacy, and we will continue to use his leadership and what leverage we have to get both sides of the peace table. It's not going to be easy, but President Trump...
This war should have never happened. It would have never happened if I were president, but it did happen. So a lot of other things shouldn't have happened too. We shouldn't have 21 million people pouring into our country through open borders, many of whom are criminals, very bad criminals, including murderers, thousands of murderers. Many killed, far more than one person, and they're roaming our streets. But Tom Homan and Kristi Noem are doing an incredible job, and we're getting them out of here. and we'll get them out. We'll get them all out. But all these things shouldn't have happened. We shouldn't have inflation. We shouldn't have had this horrible inflation where the prices have gone up. Look at eggs. So we're doing a good job. We're doing a good
Mr.
job.
President, in regards to the pause on military assistance to Ukraine, you put out on your social media post today that Russia is pounding Ukraine.
That's right.
Why not provide Ukraine with air defenses? And what happens, Mr. President, when Ukraine runs out of the Patriot missile batteries?
Good question. Because I have to know that they want to settle. I don't know that they want to settle. If they don't want to settle, we're out of there because we want them to settle. And I'm doing it to stop death, more important than anything else. Secondarily, way down the line is the money. So we're in for $350 billion, and Europe is in for $100 billion. They should be in for the same or more than us. And, you know, I watched over the last week or so what's going on in Europe. This thing could end up in World War III if we don't get it settled. This could really end up in a World War III. We got to get it settled.
So on Iran, how confident are you that the Iranians will negotiate with you? And is Israel on board with this outreach?
Yeah, I saw the hostages the other day. They came in, people that were not young, some young and some older, much older. And they gave, it was hard for them to do it actually. They gave statements as to what happened. I was asking, what happened? How was it? I said, did you see anybody in there that was kind, like out of the hundreds of people that you were seeing, Hamas? Did some of them wink at you and say, don't worry, you're going to be okay, or give you a piece of bread, or no? I said, were there any people that were like kind? I was shocked. The answer was nobody. There was nobody. Just the opposite. They'd be slapped and punched. One man broke his ribs. He couldn't breathe for a month. It was brutal. I was so surprised. Could you think there'd be a couple of people that would be kind, that would say, you're going to be okay, but they had none of that. It's pretty amazing. Brian?
Thank you, President.
He's a kind person.
Well, according to
although not to Zelensky, he wasn't.
Well, you know what, that's another
but to Trump, he's been good.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
Nice tie, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. I like yours too.
Two questions. One on peace. Why don't you think any other European countries are offering a peace deal? It seems like no one's come to the table for peace except for you.
Yeah. It's a very good question. Sometimes questions aren't answerable. They're in a very unusual position. They don't know how to end the war. I think I do know how to end the war. Despite the Russia hoax, I've always had a good relationship with Putin. And, you know, he wants to end the war. He wants to end it. And I think he's going to be more generous than he has to be. And that's pretty good. That means a lot of good things. Because frankly, you could have made a great deal if this war never started, you could have made a great deal. I don't know that anything would have had to be given up. This was not a war that was going to start, Brian. And it didn't start. For 4 years, somebody said, well, how do we know that? Well, for 4 years, it didn't start. I used to speak to Vladimir about it. I used to speak to him about it at length. It was the apple of his eye, but there was no way he was going in. And he knew, there were going to be consequences. But it did start. I mean, think of what happened. Inflation, you have the war with Ukraine and Russia, that wouldn't have happened. October 7th would have never happened. Israel, they had no money. Iran had no money. Iran was stone cold broke, and now they have a lot of money. And that's going to be the next thing you'll be talking about is Iran. What's going to happen with Iran? And there'll be some interesting days ahead. That's all I can tell you. You know, we're down to final strokes with Iran. That's going to be an interesting time. And we'll see what happens. But we're down to the final moments. We're at final moments. You can't let them have a nuclear weapon. I think that I would have had a deal within 1 month after the rigged election of 2020. They were all set to make a deal. And then when I lost, they saw this person who's a stupid person, very stupid person. And they said, let's not make a deal. And they were right. He took the sanctions off. They became rich under Biden. They went from having no money to having $300 billion. all in a short period. It's oil. Oil builds up fast. It's a nice living if you have a nice oil well. And they do. They have a lot of nice oil wells, right? So anyway, it's going to be a big thing. It's an interesting time in the history of the world, but we have a situation with Iran that something's going to happen very soon, very, very soon. You'll be talking about that pretty soon, I guess, and hopefully we can have a peace deal. You know, I'm not speaking out of strength or weakness. I'm just saying I'd rather see a peace deal than the other, but the other will solve the problem.
Mr. President, your allies are calling on you to pardon Derek Chauvin. Are you considering pardoning Derek Chauvin?
No, I haven't even heard about it. No.
Mr. President, on peace.
I haven't heard that.
In the first term, you may recall, I broke the news that you were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And the reason for that was the work that you led on the Abraham Accords. I spoke yesterday with the member of parliament, the Norwegian parliament, that nominated you. And he said what the Nobel Committee is looking for from you, Mr. President, is security guarantees for Ukraine. Is that a possibility, Mr. President?
So, before I even think about that, I want to settle the war, get it finished. Because if I'm not here, nobody's going to settle it. And President Macron has said that, and everybody said that, the prime ministers and presidents. We're pushing very hard. That's all I'm thinking about now. As far as the question about security later, that's the easy part. The hard part is getting it settled. We got to get them. We're losing 2,000 human beings every week. More than that, actually. 2,000 nice, young, although they're getting older because they're drafting much older now. In the case of one country, much older, because a lot of the young people have been killed. It's very sad, and I'd like to see if I could stop that. And I'd like to also see if we could stop making these massive payments from the United States. I mean, Biden gave away money like it was water, with no anything, got nothing for it. Europe did it in the form of a loan. They get their money back, we don't. So that's how we came up with the rare earth deal. But we started, you know, behind the 8 ball. He could have gone to Europe. He could have said, come on, you got to put up money with us. You got to put up money with us. But he never did that. They just kept handing money out because he was grossly incompetent. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. We have some very exciting news today. We have numerous fronts are being covered. Before we do that, Will give me certain proclamations. We'll sign them, and you'll hear a little bit about them. Will, please.
Yes, sir. First, we have for your signature 5 official designations of special envoys. The first is Mr. Steve Witkoff, who's actually in the room, to be your Middle East envoy.
Where is Steve? Steve Witkoff, everybody. Done a great job in the Middle East, really great. But we'll see how it all turns out. It's complex, but I think he's going to do very well.
Next, we have Mauricio Claver-Carron to be your special envoy to Latin America, sir.
Okay, good man. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have retired General Keith Kellogg to be your special envoy on Russian-Ukraine issues.
We've made a lot of progress on Russia, Ukraine. We'll see what happens, but a lot of progress has been made. We're going to stop that ridiculous war. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have designation of Rick Grinnell, to be your envoy for special missions.
I sent him to California to turn on the water. We turned it on. It was not easy because we had to go through a lot of environmentalists that are causing a lot of problems. And we have billions of gallons of water. It was on 3 days ago. You probably saw. Should have gotten a lot of press, but it didn't get much. All we're doing is giving Los Angeles and the entire state of California virtually unlimited water, which they could have done 5 years ago, which I told them they should do, but the environmentalists stopped them. And we opened it, and we did it regardless of the state. And now the state seems to be very happy. I spoke with Gavin Newsom, and he's very happy. I almost called him by the other name, didn't I? My little nickname for him. But I think they're all happy. They have a lot of water in California. Too bad we didn't have it about 2 months ago, right?
Mr. President,
That was, by the way, that was a big move. We have, I don't know if you saw the pictures that were released of the water pouring down from the Pacific Northwest and Canada and lots of other places. And it's a pretty amazing sight.
Mr. President, Rick Grinnell had a big Friday trip as well.
He had a very big Friday trip, you're right. We'll talk about that. He's a good man, Rick.
Lastly, sir, we have a designation of Mark Burnett as your special envoy to the United Kingdom.
You know who Mark Burnett is? I figure he should be good. He's certainly done a great job. Friend of mine and very talented guy. We have very talented people working for us. I'll hold that one up because Mark gets so much television. We'll hold it up, right? He'll be thrilled to see it. He's going to do a good job.
Thank you, sir. Next, your administration has smashed records for appointing large numbers of highly qualified, capable people at all levels of the federal government. These are 28 sub-cabinet level officials being appointed to a number of different departments and agencies. Some of them are quite important positions like departmental general counsels, but these are people who have been pre-vetted and have received your approval previously.
Very good. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Next, this is an executive order. Discharges your Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, and your Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, to begin a process that will hopefully result in the creation of an American sovereign wealth fund.
It's a very exciting event. We're going to have a sovereign wealth fund, which we've never had. We have a lot of things that create wealth, and you're seeing that over the last 2 weeks. I think we've created more wealth. Other people have created de-wealth, the people, my predecessors. We're creating a lot of wealth. Scott, maybe you'd like to say something about it, and I'd ask also Howard to say something about it.
Yes, sir, this is very exciting. We're going to stand this thing up within the next 12 months. We're going to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet for the American people. We're going to put the assets to work, and I think it's going to be very exciting. We're going to study best practices that's done around the world. It'll be a combination of liquid assets, assets that we have in this country as we work to bring them out for the American people.
The extraordinary size and scale of the U.S. government and the business it does with companies should create value for American citizens. If we are going to buy 2 billion COVID vaccines, maybe we should have some warrants and some equity in these companies and have that grow for the help of the American people. So bringing all these things together, I think Scott and I will create an amazing sovereign wealth fund for you, sir.
So other countries have sovereign wealth funds, and they're much smaller countries, and they're not the United States. We have tremendous potential in this country, tremendous. You're seeing that, what's happened just in a short period of time. And as an example, TikTok, we're going to be doing something perhaps with TikTok, and perhaps not. If we make the right deal, we'll do it, otherwise we won't. But I have the right to do that, and we might put that in the sovereign wealth fund, whatever we make, or if we do a partnership with very wealthy people, a lot of options, but we could put that as an example in the fund, and we have a lot of other things that we could put in the fund. And I think in a short period of time, we'd have one of the biggest funds. And you know, some of them are pretty large, I must tell you. Some of like the Saudi Arabia fund is on the large side, but eventually we'll catch it. But we're going to create a lot of wealth for the fund, and I think it's about time that this country had a sovereign wealth fund. And these two gentlemen and some others are going to work with them very closely, and they'll be heading it up, and they're going to do a great job. Two highly respected people that have done unbelievably well in the world, in the real world. So that's a big deal, huh?
Yes, sir. I think it's going to create value and be of great strategic importance.
Mr. President, why is it important for Elon Musk to have access to the payment systems at Treasury?
Well, he's got access only to letting people go that he thinks are no good if we agree with him, and it's only if we agree with him. He's a very talented guy from the standpoint of management and costs, and we put him in charge of seeing what he can do with certain groups and certain numbers. Some of the numbers are horrible, what he's found. Think of it, $100 million on condoms to Hamas, and many other things that are frankly even more ridiculous. And they're finding tremendous waste, really waste more than anything else, I think you could say. Probably fraud and abuse can be added to it, the more standard waste, fraud, and abuse. But they're finding tremendous amounts of really bad things, bad spending. You've been writing about some of it, frankly, and some of the things that they've been doing is just terrible. Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval, and we'll give him the approval where appropriate. Where not appropriate, we won't. But he reports in, and it's something that he feels very strongly about, and I'm impressed because he's running obviously a big company. It has nothing to do, if there's a conflict, that we won't let him get near it. But he does have a good natural instinct. He's got a team of very talented people. We're trying to shrink government, and he can probably shrink it as well as anybody else, if not better. Where we think there's a conflict or there's a problem, we won't let him go near it. But he has some very good ideas, and we have a lot of very other talented people also. We're bringing in the most talented people in the world. By the way, we just unrelated, but we have two of the most talented people in the world, the legendary Rupert Murdoch and Larry Ellison. So they are two legends in business, publishing, and probably every other. Rupert is, Larry, pretty much in a class by himself, right? I mean, although you may have a couple of bucks more, I don't know, but Rupert is in a class by himself. He's an amazing guy, and Larry is Larry. Larry's one of the most serious players anywhere in the world, so it's an honor to have you. This has nothing to do with you people, but they're here, and I thought it would be appropriate. I'm sure you didn't recognize them. If you're all going crazy, they're saying, what are they doing here?
Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, on the tariffs, is there any chance that Canada or China could also get out of the tariffs after you struck a deal with Mexico?
Well, nobody's out with Mexico. We had a great talk with Mexico, and we had President Sheinbaum is a woman. I like her very much. We've had good relationships, but we have to stop fentanyl from coming in, whether I like somebody or not, and we have to stop the illegal aliens from coming in. I think we've lost 200,000 people on average a year for many years, much higher than the 100,000. Could be even closer to 300,000. And they've agreed to put in 10,000 soldiers permanently, like forever, 10,000 soldiers at their side of the border and stop fentanyl and illegal aliens from coming into our country. They have a big incentive to do. Other than that, we've agreed to talk and consider various other things. We haven't agreed on tariffs yet, and maybe we will, maybe we won't. But we have a very good relationship. I also spoke with Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada, and we had a good talk in the morning, but I did ask him a couple of questions, like, you know, banks aren't allowed to do business in Canada. Canada is very tough. Canada is very, you know, we're not treated well by Canada, and we have to be treated well. banks are not, as an example, allowed. Did you know that? That banks, American banks are not allowed to do business in Canada. Can you believe that? And that's one of many things that we talked about, and I think we'll win most of the subjects. But for some reason, a lot of things have been very unfair with Canada. I noticed that in the first term. You deal with people, and after a while you begin to realize, like you learn that Larry Ellison's very tough to do business with, okay? He's a very tough guy. I mean, I'm sure you're shocked to hear that. But Canada is very tough. They're very, very tough to do business with, and we can't let them take advantage of the U.S. They don't take our agricultural product for the most part. They don't take our cars. They make cars, but they basically don't take our cars. And you know, we don't need, and look, I think we're going to have another good conversation today. We're actually speaking at 3 o'clock again. But we don't need them to make our cars. We don't need them to give us lumber. We don't need them for agricultural products because we have all the agriculture we need. They don't take our agricultural product for the most part, our milk and dairy, etc. A little bit they do, but not much. We take theirs. And as far as cars are concerned, they took in a big percentage, almost 19% of the market. And, you know, I wouldn't mind making our cars in the United States, so we have a problem there. I'd like to make our cars in the U.S. We don't need Canada to make our cars. With that being said, we're going to have another call at 3 o'clock. We had a call this morning. It was a pretty good call, I'd say. So the call with Mexico went very well in the sense that they're very strong now on the border. They're going to put soldiers there. So, actually, they're best military soldiers, and they're going to be at the border, 10,000. That's a lot of soldiers, and they want to protect it also. You know, they don't want people running through Mexico, coming through Mexico to come into our country. So they're going to do that, and then we're going to talk about other things over the next 30 days. We're going to have Scott, Howard, and Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, lead the delegation, and we're going to have a big negotiation with Mexico. I'll be involved too, and President Sheinbaum will be involved to see whether or not we can work something out on the tariffs.
What about China?
China will be speaking to China probably over the next 24 hours.
On fentanyl in China, President Trump.
We don't want fentanyl coming into our country. Now, we had another big thing, speaking of China. China's involved with the Panama Canal. They won't be for long, and that's the way it has to be. Marco just got back, as you know. He's in the process of coming back. I guess he's almost back by now. And he had a very long conversation with the leader of Panama, the respected man, and some others, the entire leadership group. And we're trying to work a deal on the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal was given foolishly years ago to, it shouldn't have been happened, years ago to Panama by Jimmy Carter and the group. We lost 38,000 people building the Panama Canal, like one of the great wonders of the world. It's the biggest job we've ever built, the biggest project we've ever built in this country, dollar-wise and every other way. 38,000 people died, Americans, all men, just about, laborers and construction people. They went to Panama. The mosquito got them. Between mosquito and snakes, we lost 38,000 people. It was the most expensive project ever built by the United States. The biggest, most expensive project we ever built 110 years ago. If you bring it up to now, it would have been the equivalent of $2 trillion. The most expensive we ever built, and we gave it away for $1, okay? We gave it away essentially for nothing. And we either want it back, or we're gonna get something very strong, or we're gonna take it back. And China will be dealt with. And we didn't give that to China, we gave it to Panama. We shouldn't have given it to Panama, but Panama, as you know, has violated the agreement, totally violated the agreement. So that's in the process right now, but they did have a very good meeting with the head of Panama.
In addition to the tariffs on China, could you say your current thinking about whether China should be forced to pay reparations both for fentanyl deaths and the million?
No, I haven't talked about that, but they do have tariffs. Honestly, nobody. The amount of money that was lost and most importantly, the lives lost because of COVID is not something that anybody could ever even imagine. It's probably $60 trillion, and all the countries in the world don't have $60 trillion. The amount of death and the amount of destruction and the amount of money lost is probably $60 trillion. I had it figured by people about 3 months ago. I just said, figure it out. Nobody knows what the real number is, but it's almost an infinite number, the damage done. No, but I have not discussed that. What I have discussed is we'll have some good meetings with China. We have meetings planned, and we'll see what happens. But that was just an opening salvo. If we can't make a deal with China, then the tariffs will be very, very substantial. Okay, I'm going to sign this one.
Sir, this is, you've obviously made making America healthy again a key priority of this administration. A key component of that is obviously heart health. This is a ceremonial proclamation declaring the month of February to be National Heart Month.
Okay. I hear we're doing very well with nominations. We'll see, but it looks like we're doing very well with nominations.
Mr. President, have you been involved with calling senators who had some concerns about Tulsi Gabbard or
Yes. Yeah, I've gotten great response. And they want to do what's right, and we've had a good response. I think we'll do well. We have great people like this. We have great, great people coming in. I'd like to say the best ever recruited for government. I think we have the finest people ever recruited for government.
Will it take an active Congress?
And you know what? You're starting to see that because we've done more in 2 weeks than Biden's done in 5 years, 6 years. They could be here between him and Obama. You add it up, okay? We've done more in 2 weeks than they've done in 12 years.
Will it take an active Congress to do away with USAID, or do you believe you have?
I don't know. I don't think so. No, not when it comes to fraud. If there's fraud, these people are lunatics. And if it comes to fraud, you wouldn't have an active Congress, and I'm not sure that you would anyway. But we just want to do the right thing. It's something that should have been done a long time ago. It went crazy during the Biden administration. They went totally crazy what they were doing, and the money they were giving to people that shouldn't be getting it, and to agencies and others that shouldn't be getting it. It was a shame. So they're tremendous fraud. But we'll be doing a report. We'll be giving you that report at the appropriate time.
Yeah. In the first term, though, USAID was something that you liked in some respects.
I love the concept of it. Yeah, sure. I love the concept, but they turn out to be radical left lunatics. And the concept of it is good, but it's all about the people.
Mr. President, you said you also want to impose tariffs on the EU. What kind of tariffs are you thinking about?
Well, we have massive deficits with the European Union, massive, like $350 billion, if you can believe it. They don't take our farm product. They don't take our cars. They don't take almost anything, but we take their cars. We have millions of cars coming in, BMW and Mercedes-Benz and Volkswagen and just so many different cars, and we don't do anything about that. And we don't charge them tariffs. They make it impossible to sell cars in the European Union. They make it very difficult, agricultural product. They actually don't take it. And they have a lot of excuses. Some of them are the pesticides and the different chemicals used. And Bobby Kennedy actually is looking at that very, very seriously, because maybe it's not necessary to use all of that. You know, we want to be the healthiest country, and we're not. We spend more money on food than anybody else in terms of its creation, but we're not the healthiest country. So maybe there is something to the fact that we shouldn't be using so much chemical, and maybe that'll stop. But Bobby Kennedy is the one, because he is not a believer in all of the things we have done, and neither are the Europeans. So we'll see what happens. But they use it as an excuse not to buy our product. And I asked a couple of the leaders, I don't want to use names, but how many Chevrolets or Fords do you see in the middle of Munich? And the answer is none, because they don't take any cars. They don't take anything. So the European has abused the United States for years, and they can't do that. And they want to make a deal. Let me tell you, in all cases, they all want to make deals. There's nobody that doesn't want to make deals. They've been abusers, and they want to make deals. So we'll see about that. But we'll have, I think, some very fair. All we want is a fair deal. And you know, there's a word, reciprocal. I'd go right now, reciprocal tariffs on everybody, because many of the countries that you feel so horrible about the way they're being treated by Trump, you're saying, oh, President Trump is so terrible to them. Well, they charge us tariffs. European Union has a VAT tax, which is through the roof, okay? It's a similar thing, similar to a tariff. It's a VAT. And they have it, and it's numbers like you wouldn't believe. And Canada, I told you about the banks, and I told you they charge us. And people don't say that. They don't like to say it. Just like they don't like to say that I opened up the water for California. It's a great thing. It's too bad they didn't do it themselves. I had to do it, and it was not easy. We did it a very rough way, and I didn't like to do it a rough way. We shouldn't have to do it a rough way. But a lot of these countries that we're talking about, you know, they're so-called allies, but they don't treat us well. And just like I got $420 billion, and now it's actually over $600 billion, the Secretary General of NATO came in 2 weeks ago, and he said it was a miracle when Trump came in, when President Trump came into NATO. He said it was $636 billion by saying to them, no, you have to pay, and if you don't pay, we're not going to be there for you. You know, somebody has to say it, and they paid. And it was a large amount of money. And one of the problems we have with the Russia-Ukraine situation is that we want to see some equalization, because we're in for close to $300 billion, and they're in for $200 billion less. Why are they in for less? Because Biden never asked them for money. He never said, you got to pay. He never did. All he did is hand out money. So we're talking with them right now, and we're actually working some deals right now. So we have some guarantees and some other things to keep that whole situation to go, really going. I mean, going. We're telling Ukraine they have very valuable rare earth. We want what we put up to go in terms of a guarantee. We want a guarantee. We're handing them money hand over fist. We're giving them equipment. European is not keeping up with us. They should equalize. And look, we have an ocean in between. They don't. It's more important for them than it is for us. But they're way below us in terms of money. And they should be paying at least equal. They should really be paying much more than us. But let's say equal to us. And they're billions and billions of dollars below. So we're looking to do a deal with Ukraine where they're going to secure what we're giving them with their rare earth and other things.
Mr. President, in terms of the deal with Mexico this morning, was that partially related to the market reaction and a criticism from Mr. Murdoch's own newspaper? He called it the dumbest trade war on the editorial page on Saturday.
I'm going to have to talk to him. I've been right over the Wall Street Journal many times, I will tell you. I don't agree with him on some things. No, it's not only is it not dumb, you're going to see. Every single one of those countries is dying to make a deal. You know why? Because they're ripping us off really badly. And the United States is tired of just being ripped off. And that's why we have $36 trillion in debt. We have it for a reason, because we make bad deals with everybody. And we don't allow that anymore. So the Wall Street Journal is wrong, because very simply, every single country that you're writing about right now is dying to make a deal, because the deals they have right now are so good and so good for them and so profitable for them. You didn't know that Canada didn't allow our banks. You didn't know all of these different things. And I think in the end, you're going to see that either very, very substantial tariffs are going to be paid by them, or they're going to make some kind of a deal.
So did Mexican President Sheinbaum?
Did what?
Did you blink this morning?
There was no blinking. No, she's a wonderful woman, but she did agree to 10,000 soldiers on the border. I would say that's a lot. Would you say that's pretty good? 10,000 soldiers on the border?
Sir,
and the 10,000 soldiers are going to keep illegal aliens out, and they're going to keep them out, seriously out, and otherwise they're going to have a big penalty. Mexico's going to be penalized. They're not going to come through Mexico anymore, and they're not going to let the fentanyl come in from China. And China hopefully is going to stop sending us fentanyl, and if they're not, the tariffs are going to go substantially higher.
Sir, just to clarify what you said about Ukraine earlier, the rare earths, is that something you want them to give the rare earths to the United States?
Yeah. I want to have security of rare earth. We're putting in hundreds of billions of dollars. They have great rare earth, and I want security of the rare earth. And they're willing to do it.
Sir, you mentioned earlier that Elon
On Canada, when you talk to Justin Trudeau again, is there anything he can give you at 3 p.m. when you talk again to also
I don't know.
pause,
I don't know.
like you said with Mexico?
I don't know. We have big deficits with Canada, like we do with all countries. I mean, I look at some of the deals made, I say, who the hell made these deals are so bad? But with Canada, I have a talk with him, and you maybe know or maybe not. We're going to meet again or talk again at 3 o'clock, right after my next meeting, and we'll see what happens. I can't tell you what's going to happen.
You mentioned that he could agree to change your mind on the tariffs?
Well, we can always, look, what I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state. We give them protection, military protection. We don't need them to build our cars. I'd rather see Detroit or South Carolina or any one of our, Tennessee, any one of our states build the cars. They could do it very easily. We don't need them for the cars. We don't need them for lumber. We don't need them for anything. We don't need them for energy. We have more energy than they do. We don't need them for energy. So I say, why are we doing this? Why are we willing to lose between $100 billion and $200 billion a year? We don't need them. As a state, it's different. As a state, it's much different. And there are no tariffs. So I'd love to see that, but some people say that would be a long shot. If people wanted to play the game right, it would be 100% certain that they'd become a state. But a lot of people don't like to play the game because they don't have a threshold of pain. And there would be some pain, but not a lot. The pain would be really there. So we're going to meet again by phone at 3 o'clock, and we'll let you know what happens.
On Israel, President Trump, you're very deep with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Coming in tomorrow.
Yes, you've mentioned in the past you're concerned about Israel being too small geographically. Would you support annexation of parts of the West Bank by Israel?
Well, I'm not going to talk about that. It certainly is a small, it's a small country in terms of land. See this pen, this wonderful pen? My desk is the Middle East. And this pen, the top of the pen, that's Israel. That's not good, right? You know, it's a pretty big difference. I use that as an analogy. It's pretty accurate, actually. It's a pretty small piece of land. And it's amazing that they've been able to do what they've been able to do when you think about it. There's a lot of good, smart brain power, but it is a very small piece of land, no question about it.
Mr. President, you said earlier that Elon Musk is doing everything with your say-so. So is there everything that he has done thus far, going to all the agencies, shutting off access, getting access to federal payments, that all has you're okay with all of that?
For the most part, yeah. If we, if there was something that didn't have my okay, I'd let you know about it really fast.
And you think there are some areas where you wouldn't let him work because he has conflicts of interest?
If there was no, I haven't seen that. And he would know not to do it. So we haven't had that yet. But if there was a conflict, we would let him work in that area.
Earlier you said with regard to Panama that they were going to make a deal, or the U.S. is going to take it. How long do they have to make that sort of deal, and are you still leaving on the table?
We're going to meet with Panama on Friday at about 3:30 in the afternoon by phone, and maybe there'll be some representatives at, here or there. But we're going to be talking to Panama on Friday, essentially. And they've agreed to certain things, but I'm not happy with it.
On the Middle East, Mr. President, if I may, do you still have doubts that the ceasefire will hold?
On what?
On the Middle East, do you think the ceasefire will hold?
I have no assurances that it'll hold. I mean, I've seen people brutalized. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. No, I have no guarantees that the peace is going to hold. Steve, you might want to say something about that. Steve Woodcock.
It's holding so far. So we're certainly hopeful, and that's the president's direction. Get the hostages out, save lives, and come to hopefully a peaceful settlement of it all. So far it's holding.
Mr. President, on a different topic, questionnaires have been going out to FBI agents across the country who were involved potentially in the investigation. Do you believe anyone involved at any level should be fired, sir?
Well, I think the FBI was a very corrupt institution, and I'm a victim of it in a true sense. I was able to beat it, but other people have been treated horribly. I think the FBI has a great had a great reputation. I think its reputation was really damaged badly, as is DOJ. Look at what they've done in terms of weaponization. Look at what they've done to a political opponent. Probably got me elected by what they did. Or I think I was doing well anyway, but they might have got me elected. But you know what? We have to have pristine, beautiful, perfect law enforcement. And what we want to do, and Cash is the one to do it. He's the one guy that is going to do it. We have to bring the reputation of the FBI. We have to bring the fact of the FBI back to what it could be. Not even to what it was, even better than it ever was. Because who would have thought that the FBI could have been corrupted like they were corrupted? Who would have thought that would have happened? Who would have thought they would have been used to go after, political opponents, essentially, but me being the number one, and so many other things beyond that. And they've been hurt very badly, and we'll see what happens. But Cash is the one to do it, and I hear he's doing very well. Cash will straighten it out. We have great confidence that we can make the FBI great again. Okay, one or two more and we'll be done.
Gabbard's nomination is...
Say it?
Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, I think Tulsi's going to be doing okay. I'm not sure. I can't guarantee anything, but she's liked by so many people, especially people in the military and law enforcement.
She has a little bit of trouble with some senators over her thoughts on Edward Snowden. I know Snowden, you've mentioned in the past you're thinking about pardoning him. Are you still, and what do you think about that?
No, I don't talk about it right now. I just, people feel very differently. Some people think he should be pardoned, and some people think it would be a terrible thing to do. But I don't get involved in that.
Mr. President, what are you discussing with Mr. Murdoch and Mr. Helsinki?
Just respect. I have great respect for Rupert Murdoch. I disagree with him a lot of times with the Wall Street Journal, but that's all right. We've disagreed before, and I'm sure they didn't have any idea what they were talking about, because already you see what's happening. Look at Colombia. Look at what happened with that. Everybody said that with Colombia it was going to be a disaster. In 1 hour, everything was settled. You know why? Tariffs. Without tariffs, they wouldn't have been the same way. They would not have treated me the way they treated me, which was extremely nicely. And I don't want to use countries, I don't want to use names, but tariffs are very powerful, both economically and in getting everything else you want. Tariffs for us, nobody can compete with us because we're the pot of gold. But if we don't keep winning and keep doing well, we won't be the pot of gold, and then tariffs won't be so good for us. But when you're the pot of gold, the tariffs are very good. They're very powerful, and they're going to make our country very rich again. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. I don't know.
Thank you, guys. Let's go.
How is the market doing?
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Let's go. Guys, let's go. Come on.
I don't think about it. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be with Prime Minister Ishiba of Japan. He's a highly respected man, doing a fantastic job. The people of Japan like him a lot. That's good. And it's a real honor to have him in the Oval Office. This is the first time he's been into the Oval Office. And when people come in here the first time, they like to look for a little while, and he did. And it was this represents some of our best presidents, but it represents a lot of other things also. But up on the wall, we have some of our best presidents over the years. And people enjoy it very much, and they enjoy being here. And it's a great honor to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. ありがとうございます。石破総理をお招きできることはとても私にとっても名誉であります。石破総理は日本でも皆様が非常に敬意を示している総理でありまして、素晴らしいお仕事をされており、国民から非常に好かれている総理でもあります。なのでこの場にお招きできることは本当に私にとって光栄であります。執務室への訪問は初と聞いております。多くの方がここを訪問しますけども、この部屋に入った際に見渡して歴代大統領とかの写真を皆眺めて感銘を受ける場所であります。ですので改めまして石破総理、アメリカ訪問していただきありがとうございます。
大統領閣下、本日お招きをいただきまして誠にありがとうござい から厚く御礼を申し上げます。
The Honorable Mr. President, thank you very much for inviting me to the White House today. From the bottom of my heart, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for the invitation.
安倍元総理のご夫人、安倍昭恵さんを通じまして、大統領閣下の本を頂戴いたしました。そこにはピースと書かれてありまして、非常に感銘を受けたところであります。
Through Mrs. Akie Abe, you kindly delivered your photo book for me, and on that, you gave me an autograph. You wrote peace for me, and I was really touched by your message.
そこには大統領閣下の深い思いが込められているというふうに感じました。
And I realized that the word peace represents what you care.
昨年の7月であったかと思います。大統領になられる前でしたが、